Good evening, you're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Belinda Lloyd.
And I'm Edna. Here are tonight's top stories.
Radical lawmakers to move bill banning hiring of Filipino domestic helpers to force apology for Manila hostage tragedy.
International conservationists put Pokfulam village on watch list of global heritage sites at risk of demolition.
Premier Li Keqiang assures ASEAN leaders China wants peaceful resolution of territorial disputes. Radical lawmakers are planning to move a bill in LegCo to ban the hiring of new Filipino maids because of their president's refusal to apologize for the Manila hostage tragedy.
They're demanding stronger measures to put pressure on the Philippines, but other legislators have warned against taking steps that would end up hurting Hong Kong families. ATV's Arthur Urquiola reports.
Did not agree.
Chief Executive Leung Yeung had good news and bad news for Hong Kong yesterday after returning from the APEC summit in Bali. Philippine President Benigno Aquino agreed to hold official talks to address the grievances of the families of the 8 Hong Kong residents killed in the Manila bus hostage tragedy 3 years ago. But he flatly refused to apologize, claiming it was not in Filipino culture to take responsibility for something that he's blaming on only one person, the gunman who took the hostages, and not the officials and frontline policemen who bungled the rescue operation. Radical lawmaker Albert Chan complained today that the chief executive had humiliated Hong Kong with his failure to demand and secure a formal apology. And he's upset there was no one-on-one meeting with Aquino.
It is totally ridiculous, for the chief executive of Hong Kong to sit beside, the president of Philippines, as a attendance, in the meeting, not as a one-to-one government officials meeting. So the whole arrangement is totally inappropriate. It's not according to diplomatic regulation, or the tradition. So for the Hong Kong government, especially for the CEO, to accept such an arrangement is ridiculous and insulting.
Civic Party leader Yeung also denounced the chief executive.
CY Leung ought to have reminded Aquinos III that his own justice minister published a report a year ago to pinpoint what wrong had been committed by various Filipino officials. Now, I just can't really count on this incompetent and incapable chief executive to really get something back for Hong Kong victims and for Hong Kong people to be able to hold our heads high. I think this is time that the Central People's Government should do something for the people of Hong Kong through diplomatic channel by exerting diplomatic pressure.
Chan is pressing the government to put pressure on Aquino to apologize by banning new foreign domestic workers from the Philippines and not issuing work permits to Filipinos.
So there are quite a lot of measures that the Hong Kong administration can undertake to put more pressure on the Filipino government to urge them that they should have a sincere apology to Hong Kong people, especially to those who suffer, and also to compensate for those who have been hurt or have been killed, in those incidents.
People Power is contemplating a private member's bill to amend the immigration ordinance to bar new maids from the Philippines. In July, Taiwan imposed a hiring freeze that prevented 10,000 Filipino workers from going to the island after a Taiwanese fisherman was shot and killed by Philippine Coast Guards in disputed waters in May. The sanctions were lifted after Manila officially apologized to the fisherman's family and paid compensation. But Chan's controversial proposal was shot down by other lawmakers. The DAB's Ip Kwok Kim said a freeze on Philippine foreign workers could have a substantial effect on people's livelihood, and such a move should not be made hastily. New People's Party chairwoman Regina Ip pointed out that although the immigration director already has the authority to make such a decision, there could be unforeseen consequences.
I'm sure the SAR government has thought about that. But that could end up hurting our own middle class and our own employment agencies, which are already complaining about shortage of supply of foreign domestic helpers. So I think the economic levers at the disposal of the Hong Kong SAR government are actually quite limited. maybe the government, instead of pursuing the Philippine government president for apology, should think about how to influence his voters to press him into adopting a more sympathetic position.
Democratic lawmaker James To said the opinions of grieving families will have to be taken into account.
We will have a meeting very soon in this week to discuss with the victim's family. And I think their view must be of paramount importance and will be seriously considered.
Security Secretary Lai Tung-kwok pointed out that half the maids in Hong Kong come from the Philippines, so the government would have to consider the effect of a hiring freeze on people here. Arthur Ricchiola, ATV News.
Security Secretary Lai Tung-kwok has shot down calls for the government to take back underutilized military sites for public use or residential development.
He rejected lawmakers' concerns that many military sites have been left idle for years and could be put to better use. ATV's Emily Sue reports.
Amid an ongoing controversy over plans to construct a military dock for the PLA along the central waterfront, the ADPL's Frederick Fung pointed out that some military sites are underused. The PLA garrison controls 19 sites totaling 2,700 hectares across the city. But Fung said at least 5 are underutilized, while others have been left idle. He urged the authorities to negotiate with Beijing to take back some of the land for public or residential use. Fung added there are enough police officers to maintain public order, implying that some PLA soldiers in the 6,000-strong garrison could be sent home. Security Chief Lai Tung-kwok denied that any military site has been left idle and described Fung's opinions as subjective. Lai said the facilities and the PLA play a significant role in defending the city. The security chief also stressed that the government has no plans to change the usage of military sites. Michael Tian of the New People's Party, citing the Gun Club Hill Barracks in Ho Man Tin as an example, said if the government won't take it back for development, it should at least open the sports club there to the public. Lai also rejected that suggestion, saying that the club had always been and will continue to be available only to military personnel and their families. When asked about the controversial military dock to be built at the new Central Harbourfront, Lai reiterated that Hong Kong had promised to construct it for the PLA under a Sino-British Defence Land Agreement in 1994. Also in Lechco today, lawmakers raised concerns over the conservation of country parks in Hong Kong. The Democratic Party's Wu Chi-wai said many environmentalists are worried that people have been carrying out unauthorized development in villages and private land adjacent to country parks. There are currently 77 such areas in Hong Kong, and today Environment Chief Wong Kem Sing promised to protect most of them by including them on a government list. But he said a balance must be struck between conservation and development needs in the area. Emily Sue, ATV News.
The World Monuments Fund has put a village in Pok Fu Lam on its watch list of cultural heritage sites in danger of being demolished in the name of redevelopment.
It's the only site in China to merit a mention and the first time that one in Hong Kong has been chosen. Nobody in Hong Kong has made much of this 4-hectare squatter area in Pok Fu Lam, but according to the World Monuments Fund, its humble appearance belies its true value. In its watch list for 2014, the fund identified Pok Fu Lam village as one of the cultural heritage sites at risk. It's the first time that a Hong Kong site has been put on the watch list, with the fund citing the original dairy farm building and the fire dragon dance held every year there as highlights. The village, which can be traced back to the 17th century, is described as a unique collection of modest traditional buildings on narrow lanes and alleys, and offers an interesting contrast to the nearby high-rise complexes. After its heydays in the late 19th century, the population declined dramatically recently, dwindling from 80,000 12 years ago to fewer than 3,000 today. The remaining villages could face eviction to make way for more high-rise buildings, as the government scrambles for land to solve the city's housing shortage. The Monuments Fund has recommended that the rundown houses be repaired so that the village can be preserved to maintain Hong Kong's urban diversity. The Italian city of Venice, famous for its canals, is among the 67 sites on the fund's list, but Pak Fu Lam village is the only one from China. The list, assembled by a team of archaeologists, historians and preservation experts, is updated every other year. Disgraced mainland politician Bo Xilai will be allowed to appeal against his life sentence for corruption and abuse of power.
The once rising star has already protested his innocence, but he now appears to be fighting a battle he's unlikely to win. Judging by his unexpected and feisty defense when he went on trial in August, it was obvious that we hadn't heard the last of Bo Xilai. Now he's back in the spotlight fighting against his life sentence for corruption and abuse of power. The provincial court in Shandong that jailed him last month announced today it had allowed him to appeal, but gave no further details. The charismatic former party boss of Chongqing was once destined for the halls of power in Beijing, but his ambition earned him influential enemies and eventually led to his downfall. It began with the cover-up of the murder of British businessman Neil Haywood, which was exposed by Bo's former crony and police chief Wang Lijun. That led to the revelation that Bo's wife, Gu Kailai, had poisoned him, and she was given a suspended death sentence. When Bo himself went on trial, he strongly denied the charges against him and dismissed his own wife's testimony against him as that of a crazy person. His performance was a stunning departure from the usually remorseful attitudes seen at such trials. It's almost certain his sentence will not be overturned, but the fact that he's still fighting indicates that he may still be a thorn in the side for the leadership in Beijing.
Premier Li Keqiang has assured leaders of Southeast Asian nations gathered for the annual summit in Brunei that they have nothing to fear from China.
He told them Beijing is committed to solving territorial disputes peacefully, rejecting concerns that China is taking advantage of the US president's absence at the summit. On the heels of the APEC summit in Bali, Southeast Asian leaders joined hands as they began the ASEAN summit hosted this year by Brunei. The 10 ASEAN members and their dialogue partners from China, the US, Japan and South Korea are expected to discuss a range of political, economic and security issues while promoting further cooperation and stability in the region. The topic that's bound to test their commitment to cooperation is the divisive territorial disputes affecting the region, particularly in light of Beijing's increasingly assertive claims over oil and gas-rich areas in the East and South China Seas. China is represented by Premier Li Keqiang, who arrived in the oil-rich state this afternoon. In an interview published in Brunei today, Li stressed that Beijing's relations with the region were at a historical starting point, and his nation did not pose a threat to ASEAN countries. Li also insisted that China will in no way follow the old pattern of seeking hegemony after becoming strong, and is firmly committed to dealing with maritime disputes in a peaceful manner. In a speech to ASEAN leaders this afternoon, Li stressed that the ongoing territorial disputes have not and should not affect China-ASEAN ties, as he pledged to work together with regional partners in reaching a peaceful consensus. A peaceful South China Sea is a blessing for all, while a turbulent one benefits no one, Li said. Li also underlined the importance of building mutual trust and neighbourly ties between the two sides. Without a secure environment, economic prosperity cannot be sustained, and without mutual trust, regional cooperation can hardly go any further. US President Barack Obama had planned to attend the Brunei gathering to press for a speedy agreement between China and ASEAN on a new code of conduct at sea to avoid conflicts. But with Obama a no-show because of the US government shutdown, analysts expect China to flex its diplomatic muscles, particularly on maritime issues. And Obama's absence is expected to give Beijing space to exert its influence in the region. And still to come on ATV's main news tonight, Pan-Democrats fail again in bid to invoke special powers to probe Paul Chan land controversy.
Barack Obama set to nominate Janet Yellen as Fed chief as he accuses Republicans of extortion